yourself, boys and girls, and pun absolutely intended. This week, this video is all about bracing. How is a guitar braced? So I have three guitars that are very similar specs, very similar materials, and the main difference between them is how they are braced on the inside. It is the most important way that your guitar can sound different and you can't see it. So I want to bring some light and I want to help you understand how guitars are braced. Before we dig in, I'm Jeremy, I'm the Guitar Hunter. Make sure you're subscribed down below. If you're new here, there are videos that come out every week, sometimes a couple a week, and these videos are made to make you a better guitar player, to give you tools and tips and wisdom to find the right guitar for you, so that you find a guitar that just excites you, fills you with curiosity and wonder, and helps you make new music and make new friends. All right, so now that you've hit the subscribe button and we're in, let's dig in. So there are three guitars and they are all braced a little different. The first guitar is a Guild M20E. This is all mahogany, made in the US. This is X-braced inside. Now an X-braced top means that the top inside the braces, they meet in an X pattern just in front of the bridge. This typically gives the guitar more bass, more responsiveness, has a larger amount of the top that is free from braces. This is by far the most common kind of bracing among most guitar brands. The second guitar is a Favilla. This was built in 1965 in New York City. It is a fan-braced top. It's a Sitka spruce top, mahogany back and sides. The fan bracing pattern is small braces that are built out in a fan or in a radial pattern. This gives much more even distribution to the tension on the top of the guitar. This is a very common bracing pattern in classical guitars. It is pretty unusual in steel string guitars that they would be braced in this pattern. And so the third guitar is a Waterloo WLS. This is made in Austin, Texas. This is a side venture from Collings Guitars. It is a spruce top. It is cherry back and sides. It is a 12 fret and slot headstock, so it's a little different than the other two. The other two are 14 frets. This is a 12 fret. But the inside is a very different bracing pattern. This is a ladder braced guitar. So within the top of this guitar, there are going to be several lateral braces. This will give this guitar a much different tone. And I want you to listen for this. This guitar sounds particularly old. It does not sound that much like a lot of modern guitars. And so I want you to pay attention to that. And now we'll do a shootout between an X-braced top, a fan-braced top, and a ladder brace top. Now, key questions to pay attention to are, think about projection. How does the guitar project? How does it sound? What frequencies do you hear most prevalent, most readily? Does the guitar sound big or small or warm or dark or bright or chimey or shimmery? Think about all of these words, all of these questions as you are listening, and if you can, get a good set of headphones. Don't listen on your phone or your computer speakers. That will give you the realist interpretation of what this guitar sounds like to be in the same room as. All right, let's dig in. Guild up first. Now, one of the important questions and details that we need to work through is that these guitars, let's talk about how they're similar and how they're different just for how they sound. Strings, the Guild has D'Addario nickel bronze light top heavy bottoms, and then the other two have very similar but different manufacturers of strings. So the Favilla has D'Addario EXP lights. These are phosphor bronze, they're coated. The Waterloo has String Joy strings. These are phosphor bronze, they're lights, and they're coated. So the three sets of strings are fairly the two are very similar, and then one is a little different. But this is a real world test. These are real world guitars. I'm a real person. I'm not a guitar shop. So it's the three guitars I had. I didn't want to restring the Guild with the other strings. Anyway, they're as close as they can be in a real world test, and my point stands. So, as you listen to these guitars, which did you hear? Did you hear X bracing, and did it remind you of certain artists? Did you hear Favilla and think, wow, that's really different? And did you hear the Waterloo and think like, whoa, that sounds very different than what I thought? Or, were your ears able to pick these things out? So from my experience sitting in the same room as them, my take on how they sound, and then generally how people view and hear these kinds of bracings. X bracing is ubiquitous. It's been around for a long time. Martin started in the 30s. Gibson started shortly after. It is a very common way of building guitars, and our brains have been told that that's how guitars should sound. And so it is very iconic, and it feels very nostalgic. Now with this, what I find with an X brace guitar is that they're light and they're articulate, and they have a good mix of high frequencies and low frequencies. It doesn't feel like either side is particularly pronounced or too loud or too quiet. It just feels like a good piano-like sounding guitar. And when I say that, I just mean that all of the frequencies are about the same volume. Now, the wild card. The wild card is the Favilla. The Favilla is fan braced. Fan bracing doesn't sound like X bracing, and it doesn't sound like ladder bracing. It's very interesting. So to me, there's a lot of mids and there's a lot of highs. There's not as much boomy low end in this guitar. Now with that said, there are a couple things that exaggerate. There's one main thing that exaggerates how bright this guitar is. And right now the strings are brand new. They are just so chimey and super bright right now. I think they'll mellow out. And the third style of bracing is the ladder braced, which was the Waterloo, which has a very distinct tone and feel, especially sitting here playing it. But as I hear it, it has this prolonged palm muted sound even when you're letting strings ring. There's a lot of mids, there's a lot of fullness, and there's, my wife has described this as like having a blooming kind of sound, that it just keeps filling out and getting really thick. It seems to fill the room in a way that the X bracing and the fan bracing just don't. So it does beg the question of how do these guitars and how does this bracing age? Now, X bracing has a history and a long legacy of aging very gracefully. These guitars don't crack up. They tend to hold together, hold their tune. They tend to sound a lot better as they get older. Now with that doesn't mean that none of them will ever have issues, but by and large, it is very rare to ever find an X-braced older guitar that has many issues. The fan bracing is probably, this is the worst of all three, as far as how do they age. Ovation guitars have aged incredibly graceless. All of them are cracked up, they play hard, they sound bad, so by and large, that guitar, just that bracing pattern, that style of guitar, particularly with the plastic back and sides, Ovation has not aged gracefully, and it's just not the appropriate bracing pattern for that guitar. There are some that are X-braced, I believe, but by and large, Ovations don't age gracefully. Now, Favillas, this one has a top crack. It is a very standard, does not scare me off. It is a thing that is almost guaranteed to happen with this kind of guitar. Now, with that said, it's not the end of the world, because typically it goes to the bridge and it's stopped by the bridge plate, and then it goes to the end block. And so realistically, as long as you have it fixed and just glued in place, you can see it, but it's not actually going to damage or hurt the guitar. Ladder braced guitars have the ability to age really gracefully too. I mean, there are plenty of ladder braced guitars. So a few years ago, I had an L1 from 1926. And so there are plenty of guitars that are almost 100 years old. There are some that are older than 100 years that are ladder braced, and they have made it really gracefully. Now, those guitars, they're so much older. The wood is so much thinner. They don't age they're definitely in the second place. X-braced holds its own, lives a long time, sounds really good, sounds better as it gets older, and then the other two seem to have bigger and bigger issues. Now, notable players of the three different kinds of guitars, most notably on this guild is Nick Drake, which there's a whole hoopla about whether he actually played it or just the photographer gave him the guitar for the record Brighter Later. But Nick Drake is kind of associated with this guitar, but other small X-brace guitars, or X-brace guitars in general, you could basically say anyone. You could say Tom Petty, you could say Springsteen, you could say Jason Isbell. I mean, you literally could say whomever you want because X-brace is just so common, so prevalent. It is the sound that our brains have been told is an acoustic guitar. X-bracing is pretty much everywhere. Now, for the fan-braced, fan-bracing is really, I thought before this video, it's tricky. I don't know if I could name 5 different guitar players that have played or are really identified with a fan-braced guitar. There are lots of classical guitar players because this is typically the way that you would brace a classical guitar. Now, with that said, there's also, I mean, my most notable players are Ovation players. I would think like Heart. What's that, like the Battle of Evermore? I'm pretty sure that's on an Ovation. For lots of people, there is this kind of iconic and kind of, there's a specific sound that comes from those guitars. They're not my thing at all, but fan bracing is out there and it does exist. Now, the third kind of bracing is ladder braced, and this is like the deep cuts, the roots, the amazing musicians long ago have played ladder braced guitars. And we attribute that to like how it sounded and how it recorded. A lot of factors outside of just the bracing, but I think that the bracing is the most important component of what made those guitars sound like that. Like I think Mississippi John Hurt, that's a legendary thumpy, mid-range, pushed, ladder-braced sound. I think of Robert Johnson, that's another obvious one. But there are other players that are, like Jeff Tweedy has played a lot of ladder braced. Jack White has played a lot of ladder braced acoustic guitars. And so these are guitars that are just, they have this thumpy vibe and they're super cool. And I will not mince words. This Waterloo it is amazing. Like this guitar has captured my mind and my imagination. I've been taking my own advice of trying to find the right guitars for me. I'm trying new things. And I found this guitar and I'm totally into it. This guitar is going to hang around with me for a long time because I just adore it. It's feather light, it's beautiful, it's articulate, it has a totally different tone. And part of that is that that's just my style. I just want to try new things and find totally unique choices to me. I don't want to show up to a show and have someone else have the same guitar as me. That's my nightmare. I love having iconic, cool, really eclectic and unique guitars. So how do you know what bracing pattern a guitar has? So I started this video with, hey, this is the biggest thing that changes the tone, and it's invisible. You can't see it. There are a couple really easy ways that you could do this. So let me grab these guitars. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you get a guitar to see what kind of brace pattern it is, first, feel free to ask. Now, when in doubt, it's going to be X-braced. That is by far and away the most common. But the easiest way is to just look inside the guitar. If you look in the sound hole here, you will see in an X-brace, you'll see 2 pieces of wood that come together. And this guitar is interesting. So it has the X-braced and then there's a little like pyramid brace right here inside the sound hole. So that's one way, that's an X-braced. And then a ladder and a fan brace guitar are gonna be tricky because both of them are gonna have a big bar right inside the sound hole that just makes it to where you're not really gonna see what's going on inside there. So what you can do, one of the easiest tricks I did, and I'll show you right now. Yesterday when I was restringing the Waterloo, I just took my phone, I put the video on, I put it on the forward-facing camera, and I dropped my phone inside the guitar, and I looked around, and it was amazing to see the brace pattern, which is so lightly braced inside. And the top is so thin, you could see the sunlight through the top of the guitar. So, yeah, it's pretty, once you know what to look for, you can pick up a guitar and you can figure out what kind of bracing it is right away. One last thing that hit me while I was talking about this video with my wife before I filmed it is when does bracing actually hurt you rather than help you? One of the guitars that most people find to be the most disappointing is like a 50s and 60s Gibson LG1 versus an LG2. So a 1 is ladder braced and a 2 is X braced. And 2s sound amazing. They're bright, they're articulate, they have a lot of bass. They're a really inspiring, good sounding guitar. And they look identical on the outside to the LG1s. Now LG1s are ladder braced and they're heavily braced and they have thick tops and they sound like turds. I had a 53 LG1 and I couldn't get over how bad it sounded. I just didn't, I mean, it looked like the coolest freaking guitar I've ever played. Like cool checked up sunburst finish and cool, you know, dark rosewood board. Everything about it was cool and like vintage, and the sound just sounded thumpy and gross and not appealing. So that's a guitar that lots of people send me messages saying, you know, hey, what do you think about this guitar? And unfortunately, I just have to tell them that most people that play those guitars really don't like the way they sound, and it's a problem. So, with that said, that is bracing. I hope you braced yourself. I already used that pun. I can't think of another pun on the fly. I hope you see now that the most important factors, or some of the most important factors to how a guitar sounds, are actually invisible. You have to know what's inside of a guitar. Feel free to ask. If you have questions, please send me a message at Jeremy the Guitar Hunter on Instagram. You can also send me a message. You can comment on this video. I look through some of the comments. And so you can ask me what guitars are what and what's braced. There are also plenty of resources that you should have. If you have questions about buying and selling guitars, you absolutely should check out my buyer's guide on my website. This is the best tool that I have made to help people figure out what guitars are what are they worth, how do I negotiate for them, how do I find the right guitar for me. So go check that out. That's in the shop. That's jeremytheguitarhunter.com/shop. There are t-shirts, there's the book, there's coffee, there's all kinds of really fun things that just will bubble up in you a creative and friendship and music-filled life as a guitar hunter. So thanks for watching this video. I am Jeremy. I'm the Guitar Hunter. I'll see you soon.